Welcome everyone to the Code and Culture podcast. I am your host, Sean Dees, and today we're going to talk about, will AI replace software engineers? Over the past few years, you might have seen that the tech industry has really taken a turn. It went from a very software engineer friendly environment where we could move around to whatever company we wanted and demand the salary that we were looking for. And now it's shifted into more of this is an employer's market. Things have changed drastically. Hiring is down, and the landscape looks a lot different for software engineers than they looked even a couple of years ago. So we're going to dive into, will AI ultimately replace software engineers? So I'm not going to beat around the bush or wait to the end of the episode to get right to it. Frankly, in my opinion, AI will eventually replace software engineers. And here is the reason why I think this way. For the past few years, companies have made a concerted effort for AI to replace software engineers. Every time a new model is released from ChatGPT, Claude, Microsoft, one of the benchmarks that it uses is its proficiency with code. And over the past few years, we've seen that proficiency rise exponentially. And we've seen companies leverage their entire company around producing a product that essentially would replace a software engineer. If you remember early last year, there was a product called Devin, which was billed as a replacement for a software engineer. When people actually got their hands on the product, they saw that it just wasn't ready for prime time, which is the same thing with a lot of these large language models right now. They're not ready for prime time, but companies are spending millions, if not billions of dollars to get these large language models ready for prime time. And when that happens, it's going to completely change the landscape of technology. A couple days ago, Mark Zuckerberg was on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he himself said in 2025, Meta and a lot of the companies that work on large language models would have a model that is capable of replacing mid-level engineers. If you haven't heard it, I'm going to go ahead and play the clip right now so you can get more of a context of what he actually said.
Well, first of all, they've already shown that AI has learned to code. I mean, this is one of the things that OpenAI said that they're learning how to code their own AI.
I think this year, probably in 2025, we at Meta, as well as the other companies that are basically working on this, are going to have an AI that can effectively be a sort of mid-level engineer that you have at your company that can write code. And once you have that, then in the beginning it'll be really expensive to run, then you can get it to be more efficient, and then over time we'll get to the point where a lot of the code in our apps and including the AI that we generate is actually going to be built by AI engineers instead of people engineers. But I don't know. I think that that'll augment the people working on it. So I mean, my view on this is like the future, people are just going to be so much more creative and are going to be freed up to do kind of crazy things.
When I hear this from the CEO of one of the biggest companies in the world, who's actively working on a model that can do this, it takes a lot of the guesswork away from me. He's literally telling you like, hey, AI is going to replace you, but hey, you'll be able to do a bunch of other creative things and use your time more rewardingly. A lot of us in our maybe late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, I don't think we have enough time to retire being a software engineer. I think AI is catching up too rapidly and we just don't have enough runway. Which raises another question. What do we do, right? How do we protect our future as software engineers when this is what we know, this is what we've done for 15, 20 years, and now all of a sudden we have to pivot because of this new technology? And I think it's going to be a little bit more impactful than what the self-checkout or the ATM had within the retail and the banking sectors. I think there's just because there's not as many software engineers, the impact is going to be even more impactful. So with that said, I don't think these changes are going to happen overnight. In fact, I know they're not going to happen overnight. The question is, are we looking at 2026, 2027, 2030? Because we do know at some point this is going to happen, and it's going to be widely adopted. One of the things that we need to realize is that companies really pay attention to what other companies do. They mimic their actions. We saw that with Twitter. When Elon came in, after he purchased Twitter, cleaned house, made changes, we saw a lot of changes happening throughout the industry. It's like follow the leader. It just takes for one company to implement something, and if it works, other companies would immediately follow. We've seen that with the return to office mandates, right? When Google and all of these other companies who said they were comfortable doing hybrid and this was the future of work. Again, going back to what Elon did, he went into Twitter, now X, and he basically said, hey, if you want to work remote, you don't want to work here. I remember that specific, I think it was a Friday, a memo went out internally and said that if people don't return to office by Monday, he's going to consider that a resignation, voluntary resignation. And you've seen that kind of trickle throughout the industry, maybe not to that insane level of like, hey, get here in 2 days, but you've seen return to office mandates trickle down throughout the industry. So again, once one company does something, other companies just start to follow. So once a company, starts to roll out these models that are going to replace software engineers, if they're impactful, if they find that eventually it's cheaper to have one of these models than it is to employ a human doing the same job, we're gone. We are out of here. At the end of the day, businesses are about their bottom line. How can they shell out the least amount of money and make the most? It's simple mathematics. It's simple business. And unfortunately, oftentimes, humans are discarded, because of it. So I think that's something that we really have to pay attention to, that we have to embrace. Don't be blind to it. Like the movie on Netflix that came out a couple years ago, Don't Look Up, which is about climate change. Something was clearly headed for Earth, and there was a protest on Earth where people had picket signs and were saying, don't look up. They were in denial. And I think that's one of the scariest things and one of the most harmful things, is to be in denial of something that, we clearly see coming. And just to play devil's advocate, let's say AI doesn't replace software engineers, right? Or all of us. It's going to replace enough to where a lot of us will have to do something else, right? If we can have an AI agent that produces superior code to a human engineer that's led by a senior developer, right? Maybe overlooking its work to catch bugs or, inefficient code. What purpose does that mid-level human serve the company, right? What value is added from having that mid-level human? If anything, it's becoming a cost that the company no longer needs, right? So what happens? You have to shed that cost. So I think we really need to pay attention to this. Keep this in mind in your future. Keep this in mind when you're thinking about coming into the industry, maneuvering within the industry, areas of the industry that you may want to maneuver to, that you may think that AI won't impact as much. And I think a lot of people have identified cybersecurity at this moment. They're feeling really comfortable with the idea that setting up firewalls and routers and switches and manually running cable, that type of thing won't be impacted by AI anytime soon. So it might be, the best choice of action for a tech worker at this point is, networking and cybersecurity. So with that said, I really hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you got value from this conversation. It's a really interesting topic. It's going to affect a lot of people. I know a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, and I would love to hear them. I would love to hear everyone's opinions on this topic. What are you planning to do? How do you feel AI is going to impact you in your future? And do you think it's all hype, or do you think it's something that we really need to look into? And with that, I will see you guys in the next episode.